Thursday.
All right, I'll call the meeting to order.
Oh, that's so nice.
First of all the handouts, so you handed out 3 meeting notes.
3 sets of minutes, or, yes, I see two of them say notes, they're all minutes. So I will,
Okay, minutes,
I'll
no.
correct that. 3
But,
sets of minutes.
So we'll read them and next meeting we'll approve them.
Yes, that's fine.
And then you have the goals and objectives and the summary and those are everything you passed out, everyone has it?
I believe so. I sent the goals and objectives last night, and we received the summary results a while ago. I don't know if I actually had sent it out for the last meeting, but if you hadn't received it, this is the update on the survey results. You may recall the survey was open from November 13th to December 3rd. Then we closed it, and the night of the visioning session, we opened it up for just about a month.
And I have this to pass out. Do you want me to do it now?
Sure.
It's
That's
just
the
one
summary
page.
of-
It compares the prior survey results with the current survey results.
Is there any summary of all the notes that we handed in from the visioning session?
Yep. I think you have a
Do we-
community workshop summary of results.
Oh, this, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
The one that's right in front of me, you mean? That one?
Can you give me a box of this paper? At some
Some
point?
paper.
Where this is coming from?
No, this is.
Oh, yeah, I like the feel.
My joke would work.
So we haven't met in a while, so should we go around and introduce ourselves just in case?
One last time? That's right, I think we all, actually for Charlie's benefit too. Charlie Donahue is a new member that has been appointed from the school committee. So Steve, why don't you start?
Okay, I'm Steve Olenoff from the planning board and I'm the chair.
I'm Ann Delaney, I'm from the Recreation Commission.
Brian Bowman, Planning Board. RJ Shear, Conservation.
Chuck Sheehan, Youth Sports.
Kristen Steyer, Westwood Land Trust.
Joe Carvatero.
Pam Kane, Westwood Environmental Action Committee.
Todd Corchin, Public Works.
Recreation.
Karen Delaney, Attorney, Conservation Agent. Jen Goldson, Planning Consultant.
Gino Colucci, Planning Consultant.
Mike Gillette, Town Administrator.
Ken Ayers, Operations Director, School Department.
Nora Loughnane, Director of Community and Economic Development.
Abby McKee, Town Planner.
Marion Claddy, Disability Commission.
Charlie Donahue, School Committee.
Welcome, everyone. Charlie, as you can see, we have a very large committee here, so.
And Eric,
Introduce myself? I'm Eric Arnold, from Hale.
and,
Jim DeLeo, resident.
okay, thanks. Welcome. Looks like we do have everybody here.
Almost,
Mike
we're missing
Gay.
just a few.
I'm missing mine. No.
Mike Gay, John Hickey, Roger Christian, and Todd Sullivan.
All right, so the first thing is the recap of the open space and recreation visiting session we have, so Jen, you're gonna do
Yeah,
that?
sure. So you have this document, it says Westwood OSRP Community Workshop Summary of Results. And I'll just go through briefly, but I think most of you were actually there. And you'll see that in the front, let's see, it's about 5, I'm counting it, 1, 2, 3, 4 pages, 3.5 pages of a summary. That's our interpretation of the results. And then the rest of it is a transcription of what everybody said, all the appendices. So we had about 43 people according to our count. And some of the main conclusions that we brought up to the top, you'll see right here under main conclusions. People said that Westwood has a need for recreation opportunities for residents of all ages, and that was actually something that was emphasized. So I'll talk about that again in a minute. The development of a community recreation center was also talked about quite a bit, and that could help serve that need. Continued improvement and maintenance of fields and recreation spaces, more fields, basketball courts, and tennis courts. And then the third bullet, people talked about the connectedness of open space resources and recreation facilities, and they talked about walking paths, bike paths and trails, and that they felt like it would foster a greater sense of community with those connections. We also asked, as you know, about open space and natural resources, and so conservation is still a priority, both for recreational use, passive recreational use of those lands, for trails, as well as for environmental conservation purposes. And participants largely agreed that the open space resources for Westwood residents they felt like were still largely unknown, and that better communication is still needed. I think that was something that was pointed out in the earlier plan as well, and they felt like that was still relevant with signage, maps, public outreach, and education. And so if we skip, I'm just going to skip around a little bit and give you the highlights, but you should feel free to read this more carefully and let us know if you have questions. We asked, if you'll recall, we showed them the 2000 open space and recreation goals from the prior plan in 2000. And we showed them 5 goals for recreation, and we asked them, how relevant are these goals? What's missing? How should these goals stay or change? And how can recreation goals be balanced and reinforced with other community goals? And then we asked them what they thought their priorities should be, particularly over the next 5 to 10 years. And then we asked basically the same questions for open space goals. So what we heard for recreation is that they felt like the goals are still relevant, but they felt as though they were not specific enough. They're very general. And they also felt like not much had been done to meet those goals, and that the town should continue to work toward them. In terms of what's missing, they talked again, this is where we really heard a lot about looking at how to provide recreation options for all ages, including seniors. Talked about the development of a recreation center. And then they also talked about specific things like a regulation-sized basketball court, a hockey or figure skating rink, and you'll see in the survey that we heard some of the same themes. And indoor recreation was brought up as something that was not addressed in the goals from 2000, as something that they felt was missing. And then I'm going to skip down to priorities for recreation. They felt as though training for coaches to lead inclusive activities was important, as well as improving and maintaining both outdoor and indoor recreation facilities, creating multi-purpose areas, and building a recreation center for all ages. So you'll see that we heard similar things in various ways, depending on what they were answering. They talked about similar things. And then when you look at what we heard around open space, we presented them with the 7 goals about open space and natural resources from the 2000 plan. And we heard that they felt like a lot of conservation land has been acquired. And some people, this was not 100% of folks thinking this way, but some people seem to think that the focus should shift toward protecting that land, and others felt like there's still a need to continue to acquire new open space. So that was something that we heard a little bit divergent views on. We heard, I'm jumping down to what's missing under open space, we heard that marketing and signage for open space is needed, better ways for folks to know where the open space are, what's able to be walked on, trails and that kind of thing, as well as connecting open space trails and paths was something that folks felt could be emphasized more in the goals. And then when we looked at priorities, we went back to educating and informing the public about open space resources, and the idea of potentially creating an app. And I think you'll see that translated into the goals that Gino will present tonight. Purchasing more land, some folks thought that. Developing trails and trail maps. And supporting, specifically they talked about supporting the work of the Westwood Land Conservation, Land Trust Conservation. So those are some of the things we heard. And I don't know if you want me to pause or go right into the survey. Some of it is kind of repeated. You can talk about it all together if you want.
I think that makes sense.
Okay, so in terms of the survey, you'll see that I made this little matrix. It's just 2-sided, and we'll give you a full summary of the survey, but this is just an easy way to present to you tonight the differences between the two. And actually there were a lot of similarities. So you'll recall that November 13th to December 3rd, we had released the survey for the first time. And I came to you sometime in December, and I said, well, I think it's very good response. 641 people responded, which was excellent. However, I felt like the young folks and the old folks were underrepresented given your population. So you decided to release the survey again and try to focus on capturing those other populations a little bit more. And I think you succeeded in that. So you released it between February 1st and March 1st. You got another 168 responses. You're following the way I did this. And you'll see that 64% of those who responded were under 18, 13% were 18 to 24, and then 2% seniors. What I did in the footnote here, I looked at aggregating all the responses. And then I put in parentheses a comparison of the total response by age cohort to your, at least the estimated population from the most recent American Community Survey. So you'll see that you're still a little bit underrepresented in the young folks, but if you go down this little thing, I just find this interesting. I think you're doing very well now. It's hard to capture some of these age cohorts, but you're doing better than you were. So under 18, total responses, 13% of all respondents were under age 18. So that's great, I think. In town, you have 26.8, but that includes everybody under 18. So we really targeted high school and I think middle schoolers. So that's I think very good.
Can you remind me how did we target them? Did we?
It was actually high schoolers. We did it right through the high school principal who sent out an email link to all of the students.
Great.
And then 18 to 24-year-olds, you have about 3% total responses from that group, and your population is about 4.5%, so that's very close. Then 25 to 44-year-olds, I would call this an over-response, but you had about 30% of all respondents were in this age category, and you have about 17% of that in your total population. And then 45 to 64-year-olds, about 48% responded to the survey in that age group. And you have about almost 32% living in the town. And then over 65, you are still underrepresented of them, I think. 5% out of all responses versus about 20% living in the town. So, not to get too nerdy on that or hung up, but I think the main message is that you made progress over the past in the second release, and you really captured more younger folks and more older folks, which is what you wanted to do. And so let's look at the differences in the results. A lot of them were the same. Most folks who responded used the high school the most, no matter which set of responses you look at. Most thought that the overall quality of facilities was very good or excellent. A little bit less thought that for the younger folks. I'm going to call it the younger folks because it was really a lot more younger folks who responded the second time. But it's still, pretty high. So then we looked at, under number 3, we asked what facilities needed to be developed or improved more. And in the top part, you'll see we showed you what responses both sets had in common. And then on the bottom, we divided it over the things that were different. Is that making sense the way I organized that? Okay. So the things they had in common, they talked about the Sheehan tennis courts and outdoor court. And you'll see when I have a slash, the left side is the first survey, the right side of the slash is the second, just in case you disagree with the way I interpreted it. I thought when they said outdoor court, Sheehan outdoor court, they meant Sheehan tennis courts, but you can tell me if I know something that you think they meant instead of that. Recreation center / community center, I viewed that as the same response as well. Tennis courts, outdoor pool, tot lot, dog park, turf fields, Thurston Fields and Gym, and ice skating rink. They all, and these are not in any order. These are just fairly random order, but on the top are the things that they had in common in terms of needing to either be developed because you don't have it or improved.
Was this for recreation and open space or just recreation?
This was just recreation.
Okay.
So I actually do have a copy of the survey here. Yeah.
Does specifically say developed or improved?
Here, I'll read it to you. It says, So it's question 3. It says, please identify any recreational facilities you think need to be developed or improved. And
Be
it's
nice
just an
to know.
open-ended question, so that's why we got different names for things, so I had to interpret a little bit.
Be good to know develop-wise, because I know there's a demand for more turf fields, obviously the skating rink, but then you get into like the improved, obviously, Sheehan courts is probably one of the biggest ones.
Right.
And the recreation center, I mean, I think
Yeah.
we are restricted in our programming. I think we really need one of those.
Mm-hmm. And then, so if you look at the bottom part of number 3, you'll see the differences, the things that, not that they were different, but they just thought of different things. And these are things that didn't overlap, that I could tell. So the first survey came up with more soccer and lacrosse fields, school street baseball fields, elementary school gyms, more connecting of sidewalks and trails as well as bike paths, more lighting in most fields, more basketball gyms, Sheehan gym and fields, Pheasant Hill Park and playground, rundown. Actually, I don't know what that means. I might have said that wrong.
Those might have been combined though.
That might
The
be
Yeah, one
Pheasant
item.
Hills, the June
Yeah,
Street.
that playground is one.
Oh, okay. And then for the second survey, they talked about Deerfield Outdoor Court, softball fields, high school weight room, and the Buckminster Pond. Those are things that the first group didn't mention.
Deerfield has an outdoor court? What is that?
It has a basketball
Basketball
court.
court. I think the clear difference in those two columns at the bottom is the ones on the left are parents and what the parents want for their children, and the ones on the right are what the kids want for themselves.
Yep.
Isn't there a weight room in the high school? They just don't like it?
It might have
It's-
needed to be
There is a
improved.
weight room, but it's primarily open to participants in sports, right?
We actually have 2 at the high school.
So can students that aren't part of varsity athletics not use it?
They can, but it's often being used by the teams, so there's usually not enough equipment left for someone else.
Was there anything specific about Buckmaster Pond, like a
That's a good
suggestion?
question, yeah.
Not here. I think it was mentioned again though, under the question, it was areas to acquire or restore. So yeah, no, I don't have
Well, 'cause
specifics.
Norwood owns it, right?
Norwood owns the water rights, we own the land. So we're limited in how we can use.
So if we own the water rights, we could maybe do more recreational type.
Well, if we owned the water rights
We don't have
and
to
had no intention of using it for drinking water, which is what Norwood has it reserved for, we would be able to do more recreational. You can't use a drinking water resource for
Boats.
swimming certainly, or for, yeah, or for boats that have motor oil.
Soil?
So the next thing that we asked.
Only from the fireworks.
Providence rather weird the way they do it.
The
And
next
that's
thing we.
minimal.
The next thing we asked on the survey was what open space areas do you use the most? So now we're getting away from recreation and more into open space. And both surveys responded Hale Reservation. You might not be surprised. And then the second most popular choice was Lowell Woods. And then there was a few more. I just didn't list them all on this. In terms of 5-year priorities for recreation, and I did rank these by the percent. So you can see there is a little bit of a difference. So, but ice hockey rink was the top priority for both groups. Trails was for the initial survey, then community center, then dog park, and then outdoor swimming facilities. Whereas the second survey was the ice hockey rink first, then dog park, trails, indoor running track, and community center last.
You could put the indoor running track in a community center.
That's true.
Just saying. And not the dog park? The dog park might not work. Fake grass, maybe.
And then when
So
we,
those are pretty,
Huh?
pretty close statistically.
Yeah.
I don't think there's,
no,
I mean, the hockey rink right is definitely higher, and then, but the trails, dog parks, pretty much the same.
yeah.
And they're all in the same range.
They were all the same, yeah.
Well, some are 30, some are, yeah, they're about the same.
Similar, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the sixth question, the way it's phrased is what areas in Westwood should be acquired or restored for the future use of town residents for recreation or conservation purposes? And it was an open-ended question, and so what people said, the things they said in common were University Station area, properties along Gay Street, and then the other comments on the other survey were Gay Street for bike route or walking, I just said that different because one talked about biking and the other one just said vaguely properties along Gay Street. Westwood Lodge land is mentioned in both surveys. Hale Reservation, areas that are not currently protected. First Parish parcel, they both mentioned. And land adjacent to the high school. And then the other set said Nahattan, how do you say it? Nahattan Street entrance to the high school, and I wasn't sure if that was the same land, but I thought it might be, so I put it together.
It's also the same as the first parish.
Oh, it is,
parcel.
okay. So those should all be the same.
So there's a big difference between acquiring and restoring here, and
Yeah, we didn't distinguish between them, yeah. You have to sort of know which lands are not already acquired.
so which, so they were just,
It was
what was the
an
actual
open-ended.
question that they were answering?
It was
there?
what areas in Westwood should be acquired or restored for the
Oh.
future use of town residents for recreation or conservation purposes. And then we asked, number 7 was, I'll read you the question. We gave them a list of types of things, historic buildings, historic places, water, conservation land, recreation land, and farms. And we asked, how important is it to preserve the following? And it was either, they said it was very important, somewhat, or not important. And so for number 7, it was very similar to some extent, but they ranked differently. And the left group, the initial survey, felt very strongly about recreation land. That was 80% felt that that was very important. Then conservation land, 71%. Then 70% water, open space water resources. 44% farmlands. 43% historic places. And 40% historic buildings. And you'll see the ranking is different and also not as strong. There weren't as many very importance on the newer survey. So the first one was water resources at 67%, then conservation land, 62%, recreation land only 54%, historic places 47%, historic buildings 45%, and farmlands 39%. Then we asked them to rate the following features, and so the question was, how would you rate the following features of current and future open space in the town? So it's our scenic views and landscapes, very important, somewhat important, or not important. Passive recreation, active recreation, wildlife habitat, and private protected land. How important are these things for the town? And so these also came in a little bit different, but actually quite similar. If you look at the ranking, just the first two are swapped. So the first survey group said active recreation is very important. 81% of them said very important. And 60% said wildlife habitat is very important. Whereas the newer survey says wildlife habitat is number 1 at 78% and active recreation number 2 at 66%. So those are very similar, but a little bit more priority on habitat in the second group and active recreation in the first group. Then we looked at the third one that came in both ranking as scenic views or landscapes, then passive recreation, and then private or protected land is the last ranked. Then the last question was, other than just the open-ended, do you have anything else to tell us? The last question was, would you support an effort to adopt the Community Preservation Act? And in the first group of responses, 42% said they'd support and 35% said maybe, with 23% saying they would not support. Whereas the second group said only 36 would support and 21% maybe. 43% said they would not support. Now, what I don't know is how much both groups knew about the CPA, because we didn't give them any information on it. And so I don't know, and I just don't know if the first group, because they were, mostly older residents, had gone through the first attempt, or how many attempts?
2 attempts.
2 attempts. Maybe they'd already gone through all that and knew a little bit more about CPA. The second group, I don't know how much they had heard about it before they took this survey. So I just want to keep that in mind in terms of those results.
I'm also looking at the age.
Yeah.
age
Yeah,
group in
they're
the
not
second one.
voters.
They're probably not paying any bills, so they're kind of clueless.
Exactly, that's another good point.
How did the survey ask that question? Did
It
explain
said,
at all what the
it did
CPA
actually
was?
explain. I mean, I don't know how much you'd absorb of this, but had a paragraph. It said the Community Preservation Act is a Massachusetts state law passed in 2000. It enables communities that attempt to create a local dedicated fund for open space, preservation of historic resources, development of affordable housing, and the acquisition and development of outdoor recreation facilities. Funds for these purposes are raised through a voter-authorized surcharge on local property tax bills, up to 3%. Local adoption of CPA triggers annual distributions from the state's Community Preservation Trust Fund to the town's Community Preservation Fund, and then we talked about how many cities and towns have it. So it's a little dense. I don't know how effective that was at communicating what it really is about. So I just wanted you to,
But for most
want to
young
put
people,
that
that
out
would
there.
probably be the first time they ever heard of it.
I think it depends. I think if folks went through one or both of the ballot initiatives, they may already know about
And
it.
high school kids wouldn't.
High school kids may or may not, I don't know.
So the last
They
time
might
was
have read it.
2008, 10 years ago,
Yeah,
so.
Right. So
These
it's
older
less
students, like
likely.
19, probably.
It's less likely, but you never know. I have a 13-year-old, granted I'm in this business, but she knows all about the CPA.
Wow.
So you never know.
What were the percentages
My kids
the first time it was on the town meeting?
I don't know the first time, the second time in 2008, it lost by a handful of votes.
Oh, no, what I mean is, it says that you can assess it up to 3%.
Oh, I'm sorry,
I'm
yes.
sorry, I didn't ask
The
you.
first time, I believe it was 2%, and the second, no, maybe the first time
No,
might
the
have
first
been
time was,
3%.
the first time we went through it, we went for the max, because we wanted to get the max,
Right.
match.
Right,
And then, the
The
second time we
second
went,
time-
I don't think we specified anything, did we? We just recommended we adopt it, and then the next discussion would be what
that might
percentage
have
is.
been,
I
I don't
wonder
recall.
how you,
Because I don't recall any percentage when we did
how would you
that.
get anyone to vote for it without telling you if it was 3%, 2%, or 1%?
Well, the vote was to really put it on the ballot, and it wasn't, there wasn't really. the-
I can look that up before our next meeting. It's in the town meeting warrant for 2008.
It just seems like it would be something that'd be much easier to do if it was like 1%.
A lower
Yeah,
percentage.
If we
I
did,
agree.
if we
If
did,
it was locked
if we
in
did
and-
choose a percentage, it had to have been a lower percentage, because we.
There were two issues. One issue was the percentage, the other issue was whether it covered all property or just residential property. In the first go-around, it was all property, commercial and residential. And that was the main reason I think it failed the first time. The people were concerned that we were assessing this charge on commercial property, and it was just a little bit before, I guess it was during a decline of our commercial real estate. We were looking for ways to encourage redevelopment of commercial properties, and this was seen as something that would detract from that.
And there's a little bit of misinformation that went out at the last minute, which kind of might have changed some of the results there.
I think the main thing is the
I think there might have
question
been
said that the
overadvertising.
taxes are gonna go up.
Yeah,
So most people are gonna say, no, I don't want
Yeah.
the taxes to go up.
yeah.
But if you look, most people didn't say that.
But with the people who would say no, they would see the taxes.
Yeah, I mean, in the first survey, you only had 23% saying they wouldn't support it. And in the second release, it was 43%.
Okay.
Jen, I have a quick
Of
question.
people that aren't voting.
Yeah.
That's less than 6% of the population. What are your thoughts on that? Do you want to hang your hat on that?
You know, this is not scientific,
Mhm.
and I wouldn't hang my hat on it, but I think it's something that the committee should discuss whether or not they want to put in the plan. You know, it's not a done deal if you put it in the plan, it's something that the community would still have to go through the whole adoption process, but it's pointing local officials in that direction. So that's a point of discussion for you, I think.
Boy, I'd sure like to see something closer to 20% before I put pen to paper.
Wait, 20%?
Responded.
Of the
The
pop-
town.
Oh,
Yeah,
respondents.
yeah.
Well, it would need
This
to
is
be,
hard to do with an N of less than 6%.
yeah, the
We didn't
real,
get the 6%.
Total population responded to the survey.
the real
yeah,
scientific
but-
survey would be if
641
you,
plus 168.
the real scientific survey would be if you put it on the ballot,
Yeah.
and then you'll really find out. But the
people-
question is
But
it
that's
worthwhile
to even go on the ballot.
pursuing
What
again?
percentage of people even go to town
I
meeting?
guess the question
Right, the same
I
people
mean,
that
it's a
responded
low
to the survey
response
are
at
probably
town
going to
meeting.
town
Far
meeting.
fewer people go to town meeting and responded to this survey.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is actually, 6% might sound like a low number, that's actually a phenomenal number for a survey of this type. You don't usually get that many responses.
And I think if you frame it within a discussion of actual projects, goals, priorities, you can work it to say that the money is being put aside for those things.
Another thing that usually helps is if you have specific projects in mind that are
Yeah.
going to happen
Right.
anyway. It's a way to get some additional funding from elsewhere instead of all town money.
Yeah, because the other thing happened with this survey is there were certain recreational groups within the town that were using large email databases to push it out to their
Mhm.
folks and say, hey, if you want a baseball field, if you want a hockey rink, this is your time.
Hockey
So
certainly
that's-
worked.
That's
Yeah.
one of the things that happened.
Good job.
Yeah.
Issue with stuffing the ballot box.
Can I just clarify, was this an assessment in addition to your property taxes, or when property got transferred, like when a property was sold?
No, it's on your regular
Okay.
tax
Yeah.
bill
Okay.
every year.
Yep, you put that on the town meeting, the taxes might go up, you'll get people to come.
Yeah.
All right, so,
So this might lead right into Gino's goals, because you can see that he really pulled them from what you heard, and I wonder, should we just launch right into that, Nora,
Could
or?
I make a comment about the goals before we launch them? Because I was absolutely stunned that the majority of them talked about open space and it was so little on recreation. I almost felt like, why am I even on this committee? Because recreation was all lumped in one, the community center wasn't highlighted, the private hockey rink was highlighted as much, if not more, than the community center. I mean, it just seemed very, very, very lopsided to me.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, we can put more, that's one of the reasons that the draft is common here, we can put more emphasis on recreation.
Certainly should have equal number of goals, I think.
We can do that. We might have to break it up a bit, but that's certainly possible. I think the objectives represent a lot of what was said in the survey and the workshop. But if you feel like they should be upgraded to goals, some of the objectives should be upgraded to goals, we can do that and even it out more.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
So should we?
Yeah, why don't we go through this? Before you do though, I just wanted to point out one thing. I did call up the warrant article from 2008, and it was set at 1.5% for the CPI, so it was
Okay.
addressed in the article.
and with no commercial.
Against real property, I don't see a restriction to just residential. Surcharge on real property for the purposes permitted by the Act. So it doesn't limit it to residential, so it seems to have been residential and commercial property
Okay.
at 1.5%. With an exemption for the first $100,000 of taxable value of residential real estate, no exemption for commercial real estate. And yes, it was indefinitely postponed. We don't have the vote, to see exactly what it was, but my recollection was it was a handful that it lost by.
Is that pretty typical to see it not restricted for commercial, or do?
It
a lot
really
of towns-
varies.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know the statistics, but I've seen many towns with both.
Mostly residential.
All right, go ahead, do that.
Well, these aren't in any particular priority order, but we can put them in priority order if the committee so chooses. So the first one, which is really one that was not specifically in the 2000 plan, was to improve public access and connectivity among open spaces, recreation facilities, town properties, the town centers, and historical resources. As one of the objectives states, to create a network, which was a high priority item in the survey and the workshop. I don't want to go through all these individually, but some of the highlights would be to increase access. There might be a need for vehicular and bicycle parking at some sites. The signage, which was pretty loud and clear, was needed. And then walking distance, having facilities within walking distance of all residential neighborhoods.
So this was a previous goal from the prior.
Well, it wasn't a
No, it
goal,
wasn't.
it was, but there was an objective, I think, or there was comment about creating connections. It wasn't a goal from the 2000 plan.
Okay, I thought that's what this one was pointing to with number 5 wasn't accomplished. They said that not much has been done to meet these goals, such as number 5 in the last one, and that sounds a lot like this goal to
Yeah,
me.
you're right, it's very similar, very similar goal. Number 2 is, again, a repeated goal about identifying and acquiring more lands for open space and conservation, in particular contiguous to existing protected land. Again, provide the connectivity, high natural resource and habitat value in areas of town with limited open space. Updating maps, acquiring the high natural resource lands, acquiring lands in areas of town with limited open space. Although open space seems to be pretty well distributed around town. Some of the open space areas are small, but they're sprinkled throughout the town fairly well, with almost probably close to meeting the goal of being within walking distance of most of the towns. Maybe not quite. And then collaborating with the land trust and other conservation organizations. Number 3, protect and enhance the natural environment. Collaborate with Charles River and the Ponset River Watershed Associations. We had learned before that there's a fair amount of collaboration with the Ponset River watershed, but not so much with Charles River. Encourage use of the open space residential development bylaw for new residential developments to generate additional open space. Discourage use of invasive species by residents and encourage their removal and proper disposal. And adopt as appropriate best practices for sustainability and resiliency to climate change. Goal 4, educate and create awareness about Westwood's existing open space and conservation areas. An idea from the workshop about creating an app with information about those spaces. Collaborate with the schools and service organizations to educate residents. Create a signage program and update the town website. Goal 5, protect community character. Again, some of the objectives are repeated because they're also applicable here. But support Westwood's village centers, protect scenic roads, and here, kind of subtly, is consider adoption of Community Preservation Act, and that can be upgraded as a goal if the committee decides that that's not necessarily as a goal, but it can have more prominence here if the committee wishes to push that. And collaborating with the Historical Commission and the Historical Society, again, to educate about the town's history. Goal 6, provide quality recreation opportunities for all Westwood residents. Use the results of the survey to determine facilities and programs that need attention. Inventory the lands and fields. Map them. Identify uses, to confirm the ones that meet regulation size guidelines, ones that might need lighting, time of use, catalog the activities that happen at each field and facility, and then establish feasibility of the ice rink and or community recreation center. And research public-private partnerships to fund that initiative. Explore locations including the Westwood Lodge, or a former school site if an existing school were to go offline. Investigate revenue-generating possibilities that would enable the center to cover some of its costs. 7, improve maintenance of recreation fields. Again, inventory and identify causes of maintenance issues. Meet with town departments responsible for maintenance and recreation and community groups that use them. Identify resources needed to improve maintenance. And goal 8, improve management and condition of conservation areas, prepare a maintenance and use plan for each, really a management plan for each conservation area. Identify, again, resources needed for maintenance and management. And again, develop maps and brochures for each area that's open for public use.
Oh, I think something left out of goal 7 is you want to get people to use recreational fields and facilities. But whenever this, and I know this has come up, and even comes up on the pedestrian and bicycle committee, is easy means of communication for someone who has a problem, something's not working, something needs to be fixed. Whether it's a pothole in the street, whether it's something wrong in a conservation land or a recreational facility. We've been on and off talking about that for a long time, and I still don't see it really happening. That you have one easy way for people to just getting a little concerned, and then they have all these computer things to do this nowadays. And so should we be adapting something like that? So we've spoken about this before. About, one of them used to be like reporting street lights out, but nowadays that shouldn't be happening at all. But anything that any kind of problem that comes up, for the residents to get their input, and I think one of the biggest ones would be, if you have a field has problems, you're going to start hearing the most about one of those facilities. Everybody.
I've generally found the recreation department and DPW to be responsive as far as any problems we've ever had with the fields. I mean, it's just a question of someone else that doesn't do youth sports all the time might think to call them, but
yeah,
are we really a big enough town to have a different layer like this be the central nervous system of?
Well, it should be part of the town website, part of the. So people like us know who to complain to and who to call.
Yeah.
But the average person doesn't, and they say, someone should do something about that. But who am I going to call? Or, am I going to get anywhere? So you probably don't get typically all the complaints that are out there.
So you're thinking more of the conservation land than or you're gonna call DPW?
Yeah, rather than someone sees something wrong somewhere, whether it's conservation land, the street, or recreational facility.
I think like
something's
playgrounds
broken.
and fields, most people call.
They know, I
recreation.
think they
We get a
know
lot of
about
calls for those.
One resource the town has that is the cemetery. And I know this because all the third graders do a tour of the cemetery, and they point out where the drummer boy was buried and Betsy Baker, and it's a valuable resource that if the town knew about it, with appointments made, I think a lot of people like the half-an-hour tour going through. It's already a tour for the little kids, but it's a very interesting tour. With regard to the hockey rink, I think that's a great challenge. These are $5 million things, but a lot of towns in the wintertime, they freeze their tennis courts. And so every little neighborhood has a little tennis area, and little kids play games. Well, the feasibility of behind the high school, the large field there, put tops on it, and flood it, and lights, where you could have a skating area in the wintertime out behind the high school when it gets cold. So it's artificial ice and natural ice. There's a lot of places where it's natural ice, with a little help from the Public Works Department and the Fire Department, you can set up a lot of these sites all around the town. And I think that is worth looking into. Another thing is the town of Norwood had a program 8 years ago, I think it was, where the YMCA wanted to build a facility right out there off of Route 1. And it was like a $10 million facility, and the YMCA was using its money to fund it. They just wanted some people to come forward and to raise some money from the car dealerships, whatever. But it's going to have a hockey rink, a swimming pool, basketball facility, all of that was on the drawing board, and they put a lot of time into it, thinking it through. It fell apart at the end, but a lot had been done. And so the issue of a partnership with other groups like the YMCA, who already has, the site where this was to be was about 50 yards from Westwood, it was just on the Norwood line. So it is something that might be worth looking into at some time as far as where do you get the resources, and it's not necessarily coming out of us totally, but we raised some money to help support it, but it's, they already seriously looked at building those 3 parts of one big building down there not too long ago.
Does anyone else think that the hockey rink and the recreation community center should be separate items? And recreation, I mean, hockey feels, we were talking about private funding here and fundraising, and I think the recreation facility would reach a much broader audience. There could be cooking classes that would extend the summer programming, which fills up in March every year with big wait lists. You could have the basketball court, you could maybe build the running track, you could have the fitness facility.
I think
it could-
in general, when I was reading the goals, I mean, I think there's, in a broader sense, there's some way we've got to reconcile the 809 responses we had from the town with the 43 active participants at that visioning session. And I feel like this is a little heavy from the visioning session and not as representative of the 809 respondents. To your point, when you look, I mean, it's kind of hard on 2 sides, but when I look at number 8 on the back of this, maybe 5 and 8, 809 people took the time to fill out what they think are the things that are very important, right? So active recreation does speak to the community center and to the hockey rink and so forth. Wildlife habitat. I don't know, I just kind of feel like this is a little bit overly representative of the visioning session, and while that was really great and it was good to get all the input, I'd like to see it a little bit more heavily reflective of these goals that people have outlined.
I split them 50-50.
And I think it's pretty much 50-50. I think it's active recreation
Yeah.
and habitat or conservation spaces. And then I think you break down each of those to talk about, of the active recreation, what were the highlights, right? It was the hockey rink, it was the community center. Of the open spaces, it was trails, it was wildlife habitat, it was that connectivity. I know that was a big theme that night. But there's a lot in here that's probably in the weeds, and I think we kind of...
No, I agree, and Charlie, I'm happy to hear you say that. I'm disappointed that it didn't come up in the documents tonight, but what you stated tonight, I said at our previous meeting, and the fact that, man, I'm disappointed. I thought it'd be important to co-join with other communities on some of these things. And I said that we ought to collaborate with other communities. I think that message should come out of this committee. The other thing is, and I agree wholeheartedly, I think this really is 50-50. But when I look at the top items, I look at soccer and lacrosse, I look at the hockey and those sorts of things. But I think, shoot, Charlie, you got a better handle on the money than I do, but these are big ticket items. These are probably kind of things we ought to look at a collaborative effort with other communities or other organizations.
Well, Norwood is about to get funding from the state for a hockey rink. Been working on that with Rogers, who used to be House, Ways and Means Chairman. So, the people in Westwood are gonna have access to that ice, when it gets available. So, but my love all along was if you have these small rinks all around the town, that's up in Canada, every neighborhood puts up a rink, and with the public works and the fire department, that's the first step that you could do for low money, and it would be something that doesn't exist right now. And the ponds are too dangerous nowadays because they don't freeze as well as they used to do years ago, so you don't want kids going out in Buckmaster. But, 2 inches of ice gets frozen and you're skating families, the kids. So there are some goals incremental that you could do right away without, getting the $5 million or the $10 million you need for these other things. But I do think, this idea of what other towns doing makes a lot of sense.
Well, Ken, so you dealt with a lot of these plans. I mean, there are 2 things. There's what you want, and then there's how to get it. And how deep do these plans usually get into how to get it? Because we want a rink, we want this. That's what we want. How you get it is going on your own, doing in cooperation with other communities or like the YMCA.
Yeah, the state requires that there be an action plan as well as part of this. I mean, you could talk
Right.
more specifically to what will be included.
Right, these are goals and objectives. The next step is an implementation plan that would identify more specific steps as to how to get there. And that would include working with other communities, different ideas for generating revenue.
And generally you give a list, you know, this group shouldn't say, okay, the way to go is to cooperate with another community or find somebody else. We would just list the different ways it could be done.
Right, there would be more than one option. I mean, it wouldn't be only working with other communities. But the action plan, it includes, it identifies the primary entity responsible for that goal or objective, supporting entities, a timeline, resources that might be available. And those resources could mean either not just financial, but it could be legislation or existing laws or that type of thing. There's a whole range of resources that could be available. That's all part of the action plan.
And you also prioritize them in, say, long range, short range kind of thing.
Yeah, through the scheduling, yes.
And if the group feels, you know, we really want to do something, then you should say right away the town or the selectmen should form a committee to study how this should be done. Some particular action, like a skating rink or recreation center.
That could, like one of the, in the objectives right now for the community center and ice rink says, consider developing those things. So in the action plan, it probably would say something like, selectmen appoint a committee to investigate further.
Are you talking about an action plan that's part of an application for a specific grant down the road, or an action plan that's actually part of this?
Part of the
That-
open
to
space
this.
and recreation plan. So there's a table that goes at the back of it that's the implementation plan, and it lists the strategies for how you will achieve the objectives that you've set forth.
I'd like to share with you, if I could, I got some advice from Nora, but I came to her about 3 weeks ago with some questions, and this might help this discussion. This is what I've tried to find out myself on where you can get funding and how do you do it by looking at what other towns have done. So I'm going to just summarize for people who aren't aware of the details. The Community Preservation Act, okay, does 4 things: recreation, open spaces, historic preservation, and community housing. Now, what I put in here is a packet of what these other towns are doing in these areas. Recreation, athletic fields, parks, playgrounds, trails, community gardens, adults and youth sports, open space, buying things, streams, land, agricultural land, historic preservation. The town hall in Needham is being preserved with this money. Preservation, rehabilitation, and the community housing. A lot of towns have adult, senior housing. The next page is there's 2 pots of money. The one pot that Westwood would generate itself by taxing itself, and if you do that, you go after the second pot of money. The second pot of money comes from the Registry of Deeds, and they give to the state every year money based on Westwood people's use of the Registry of Deeds. Mortgages, discharge mortgages, all of that kind of stuff. So last year, the Registry of Deeds, Norfolk County, gave to the state $54,000 from Westwood people's use of the Registry of Deeds. That money has been going into this pot for 18 years. So far, the Westwood use of the Registry of Deeds has given to the pot about $900,000. Okay, that's been spent by 172 towns who are into this program. So you don't go after that pot unless you're in the town program. Okay, so the 2 pots. So this is one of the inducements. Now, 172 towns are in the community preservation thing. They got it through their town meetings or whatever. This next sheet is a summary, just some of the 172 towns. And it's similar to Westwood in many ways. The school committee, we look at MCAS, how are we doing versus Concord and Lexington. So that, we're very competitive on, are we as good, better, how can we get better? The first number you see under Concord, 1.5, that's the percent of the local taxes that you pay without exemptions, et cetera. So that means if you pay $5,000 a year in your taxes, it's $50 that goes into the fund. If you pay $10,000 a year in taxes, it's $100 you contribute to the fund in Westwood that's available. The second thing is LI, low income. A definition is made of low income people. It's mostly retirees who are living in a house that they don't have a lot of money anymore. So there's a definition so the low income people don't pay anything. They're exempted. You come up with the definition of that. The next one is 100. That means $100,000 usually. If the house is worth $500,000, it's the tax you pay to the town on $400,000. Okay, you take $100,000 off, you choose whatever you want. But again, you're paying this Community Preservation Act is, the 1% again is 1% of the tax. $5,000, $50. The next one is R or C. Almost everyone here is an R. That's only on the residential property. If an R and C, it's they tax commercial and residential. There's a few have Cs. Now, when I asked historically what happened in Westwood, the commercial was in there at one time when the town was trying to bring commercial people in to fill up Westwood Station. That wasn't very popular. Nora says it lost just by a little bit. And I believe at one time it might have been 2, 1.5. Almost everybody here, you look down here, mostly is 1%. So that's basically, and if you look on the right-hand side, these are big towns. The town of Norwich just went into it because when they were told all of their Registry of Deeds money that's being spent by Needham, they got all ticked off and said, we want. Now, the money that we put, the $55,000, a committee like this, a smaller committee, sits around and develops a plan. You can submit it to the state for that state money, as well as you get your own money. I did ask Nora, what would Westwood generate with all of these things, the $100,000, low income, only in residential, it'd be $700,000 a year. That the town would be, the committee would be deciding, what do we put it into? Because if Needham's money went into bonding the reconstruction of their town hall. The next sheet is just some communities and what they have done. Now, I did ask Mike Gillette for his advice. He said, I want to see Bedford. That's the town we look at. Very similar to Westwood, very size. So this is what Bedford has done. Mike said he also goes to these meetings of town managers, and the guys in Bedford are talking about all this stuff they're doing. And Mike says, we don't do any of this stuff. So this is just a summary of some of the things Bedford has done with this money, the state pool as well as their own. The left-hand side, tennis courts, skateboard parks, bike paths, bike path extensions, boardwalks, all of this other stuff. The right-hand side, preservation. Lower left, a lot of the work that they do with preserving older buildings, put windows so the housing is on the lower right. So this is just one other town that's been in it since 2002, while we've done nothing for 18 years. The next one, Concord, similar to Westwood, many, many ways. We compare ourselves in the school committee with what they're doing in their educational system. The upper left-hand corner, walking paths, football fields, renovations, all of this sort of stuff. The church, repairing the church, restoring the historic buildings, and they've been in 50 projects since 2013. The next one is Needham, and I know the town hall is a big part of the Needham's thing, the biggest project that's ever been funded out of this thing. And the last sheet is Canton. This was in the Globe 2 weeks ago. Canton has, Paul Revere evidently used to do a lot of his work over there in copper, so they're preserving Paul Revere's copper stuff. The burying ground. They used to have a hockey rink that the town of Canton get for $1 from the state. The roof collapsed. Westwood High used to play all their games there. But on their target areas, they're gonna build a hockey rink with this community preservation money.
But that's indoor?
It's it's an indoor artificial ice rink, right next to the golf course.
So can we use this money for indoor facilities?
It's for outdoor recreation.
So how is Canton using it for indoor?
I don't know.
But it's evidently they're proceeding to do it. Maybe they can leave the roof off of it, you know?
But there's a big development there, so I think that there's some, there's a deal going on with that Paul Revere area. It's not just restoring that, they're putting in.
Yeah, there's a whole redevelopment.
They're doing
It's a
all
whole
these things.
industrial area.
But to answer
In the last
Ann's
4
point,
years,
it's
Canton-
semi-outdoor, which is probably how they, it's the old
Okay.
MDC ring. Quarter of it collapsed, and now they're trying to fix it up.
I mean, you can have a roof on it, but it's not.
It's not
Yeah,
enclosed.
Right off the house.
Yeah.
In the last 4 years, Canton has spent $2.47 million out of this community preservation money for the projects listed above. Some of them, are just projects, it says here, what the Glob article said about the Canton people. It's coalesced the people to become more actively involved in the community, and this money provides the means to study projects. It takes an idea from the drawing board through the study phase to fruition. So this is, you just don't build it, it's, the community gets together. You get some money to study it, you get some money for consultants, and you work your way through it. So anyway, and I apologize because it's my first meeting and I should shut up already.
I think you
But-
should go to the town meeting and spell
This
this.
is a really
Well,
good recap.
So,
Yeah.
my suggestion is for your consideration, because you've all put a lot more into this than I have so far. I would like to see a subcommittee, Mr. Chairman, of people who could work on this, maybe go to the groups that are gonna be needed if it's a town meeting, to see the people preserving land, the people in recreation, to get their support, to get their ideas, and to come back to this committee with asking you for your support for it. But I do think I'd be happy to offer help if I could. But I just want to share that with you, because
I just have two comments for this. One is the objective where it says, use the results of the survey to determine facilities. I don't think it should be just the survey. Because again, I heard that there were some groups that were using big email databases that sent around. So you can't just take the percentages at face value, especially the percentages of them. Especially because when I was at that open space session, every table wanted a recreation center. And I only heard the hockey rink mentioned once, and I like a hockey rink idea. I'm an all-comer type of thing. I think all the ideas are great. But it seems like the hockey rink is in prominence here. I would like to see it separated to let the residents decide what they want to do with it. But I'd like to see that first bullet point change, because the objective shouldn't be just the results of the survey. Because it really seems like it's prominent there. And breaking out the community center. And the other thing that I heard a lot of at that open space session that I don't see here is that there seems to be a lack of fields. I even spoke with somebody who's in charge of the soccer setup, and he says that there's a conflict between lacrosse and soccer for getting space. And I don't see that here. I see like evaluating the fields and restoring them, but I don't see anything about a new soccer field or a new...
Or lighting.
Yeah, exactly.
Existing fields, more turf fields.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Brian,
need,
it
like,
is here,
an
it says more soccer and
evaluation.
lacrosse fields.
It's not on the draft.
But it's
Oh,
not
in
at
the draft.
16-point font.
Yeah.
It's in here.
I'm also wondering,
I'll
some
look
of the
at that.
goals for open space
And a
say
43.
acquire
And a
land,
800.
but on recreation says consider development. I would like it to be as strong as acquire, strong language, build a.
Okay.
If it's a goal, and then we can either reach it or we can't, but we can at least try.
At some point, we'll need like a list of things, and we all should vote on them and decide, what we want to pursue, because we can just keep discussing them, but we really need to ultimately come to decisions. So the topics are pretty obvious, and at some point, should we move forward with the Community Preservation Act or not? Should that be a recommendation or not? Do we need a subcommittee to explore it further, or does everyone understand enough about it, simply after your presentation, to be able to make a decision?
A decision to bring it to town meeting?
A decision that this plan recommends that we bring it forward, and then the town once again try to
Adopt.
the Community Preservation
I
Act.
think that should be this committee.
I think,
I
we should
don't think it should be a
recommend.
subcommittee of this committee. I think it should be this.
Yeah, that's
committee.
why I'm asking is everyone by now knows enough about it, or
Take a vote, do we
can-
want to
yeah.
recommend it?
So at some point, we should just take a vote on whether we should, one of the key recommendations of the plan should be whether we should go forward and recommend that the town adopt the Community Preservation Act.
So Steve, I think that's what this draft goals and objectives is. This is the list that you're talking about, and this is the first step, so it's the first time you've seen it, and Gino's going to make some revisions based on the comments we've heard today. But eventually, what you will be doing is taking the word draft off of this with the final document, and this will be your vote. So if there are specific goals that aren't in here, they need to be added. If there are goals in here that people don't feel we should go forward, they need to be removed, and same with the objectives. Then, once that's finalized and this committee has voted that these are the goals and objectives that you'd like to bring forward to the planning board, then we move on to the strategy stage, where we look at how we have specific strategies to implement each of those goals and objectives.
Should we consider adoption of Community Preservation Act out and put it as its own goal?
That's what I was
I think
thinking.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
Yeah.
It's really buried in there right now.
And then that could address some of the fields, the soccer fields, lacrosse, I mean, conservation, it could address a whole bunch of outdoor lighting.
Should it go towards the front?
I think so, since
Yeah.
it covers both areas.
Yeah.
of
I don't
what
think we'll be
the
successful.
committee's about.
Right, the objectives to follow can't be met
Yeah.
unless we've got some
Yeah.
source of income to fund this stuff, additional funds.
And then later on, we'll get to
People
the
that community center.
discussion of the parameters of the CPA that we want to put forward. Because you have to have a strategy, you have to have a concrete determination of what percentage you want to go to, and then the other details that Charlie's put on the chart here. Those are probably things that we should really, as a committee, decide which way we want to go with those things, rather than leaving it vague and open-ended.
Yeah.
We better sell at town meeting, I think, if we have a
If you
plan.
really can show projects that you'd be going to town meeting requesting funding for anyway, that just comes in here and now you have a matching fund opportunity.
This is gonna sound very naive, but our property tax rate changes periodically. Is that dependent on what we vote in at the town meeting, what we vote to support?
Whatever the tax rate is, this would add another, if you chose 1%, this would add
No,
another 1%.
I mean, apart from this. So we go to town meeting and there's brand new school that's gonna be built, and so would our taxes normally increase because of that? Or would we have to vote and increase
Oh,
in the
does
tax?
does it cover any override items?
It's
Could
not,
we
it's
say-
not, it's not part of the 2.5%, if that's what you're
So
asking.
could we
It's
say your
outside
taxes would go up
property.
like these things need to be funded, you know, your taxes would go up regardless, support this act and we can get money from the state too? Can we make that argument, or is that a bad argument to make?
Well, no, that's why we were talking about, if you can identify specific projects that you're likely going to
Yeah.
proceed with anyway, it's a good argument to say, if we do this, we're getting a discount on the total cost
Okay.
because
Yeah,
we're getting the matching funds.
Okay, I
The
get
the
it.
matching funds, you have to understand, are much less than they were. The first few
Mhm.
years, it was 100%. It's down, I think, 10 or 15% now.
cause all these people spent the
Yeah,
money.
yeah, exactly.
Well, and the
So
legislature hasn't appropriated.
If we
More.
had the CPA in place last year for 2017 at 1%, we would have raised about $700,000 in taxes, and we would have been able to apply for our share of the registry taxes, which for Westwood alone was, you know, 50-some-odd thousand dollars. Now, you may get more than that. So when you apply for a grant, you may get a larger percentage than what you actually put in, but you get at least.
Could we clarify, how does this, you don't, I thought everyone just gets distributed a certain amount in relation to the amount of money they've raised.
Yes, but there's a formula and there's incentives to go for the full 3%. The
Mhm.
towns that have
Right.
3% get a bonus.
And
But otherwise, it
accumulates
is a
that,
formula
too. Your
that,
fund would
depending on how
accumulate
much you
funds
raise,
into
you
it,
get
so
that
Yeah,
much of a match.
but the amount of money you get from the
that's how
state
we have
is
the
completely a
fundraising
function of how
all
much
around.
money you raise from the
Yeah.
Would it
surcharge.
get any state funds
And
too?
how much money is available?
No,
to
you'd
be
apply for those per
distributed.
project.
Right, well, I mean, out of the pot, your share is according to how much money you have, so it's your proportion of all the monies out there raised.
There's 300 towns
Times-
putting into
times
the
what's
pot
available.
and 172 taking it out. In the early days, it was 30 towns taking it out, 100 or 300, so it's less now as more towns get it.
So can I say a couple things about the goals? And some things have been mentioned, but goal number 6, just has a lot packed into that one goal. And the fields component, I think those two bullets, inventory and catalog, the fields and uses, we've accomplished that. And so I would say we would be wanting a goal about evaluating the adequacy of field space and looking at, you know,
Given the needs of
new
the town.
development or development to expand our fields. I agree that the ice rink and the community center should be split, especially since the ice rink is looking at potential private operation. I don't think the community center would fit in, and all the broad-based needs that would be focused there would be a potential for that.
So we agree that they should be two separate
Split.
goal items.
Yeah. And then for number 7, the maintenance one, it would be nice if we could mention in here, specifically playgrounds and courts, have been something that we've been looking at ways to maintain those and haven't had a real regularly scheduled maintenance schedule for those. So we've been tackling those through some projects as of recent, but some of the things, especially with playgrounds, ADA accessibility has come up. That's something that has some legislature going before the state for it, and I would like to see us have that mentioned in here, because you know, having the playgrounds and the field spaces be accessible would be something that we would want to look at having a plan for.
Well, I mean, this is pretty vague. I mean, basically, when you read this, it just says we should maintain everything better and figure out how to do it. I'm sure we're doing that. I mean, what's the real thing we're trying to do here to have better fields and better facilities?
I don't necessarily think it's better fields, I think it's more
Right.
fields.
Oh, well,
Like,
so that's the two things. So is this,
I'm not sure it's maintenance of the field.
I don't think it is.
okay,
Yeah.
so this says
But
maintenance,
maintenance of
it doesn't say
playgrounds
more,
are- yeah.
so that needs to be changed then. We don't need goal 7.
This needs to
A
be
lot
more
of that's already-
specific,
it's
because a
good.
lot of
Yeah.
our problems in town is field space, field use, and it all leans towards more artificial fields.
Yeah.
And it's really, that's where
Switching it
everything,
over
yes,
or-
that's
Yeah,
where this
yeah.
whole conversation
I
should be
think we should
driven.
have a goal of expanding our
Exactly.
artificial fields and lighting.
Yeah.
So converting
And lights
existing
is the
fields.
whole
Chuck, you're
point of-
supposed to be saying.
See, the lights is the whole point of the artificial turf.
The
Yeah.
problem with
you
the
know,
lights,
for-
though, you have your butters, your neighbors that are, it's not an easy, oh, let's just light this field, and it's a great idea, but
Yeah,
we're,
but when you look at the high school complex in here, and it was like 89% of the residents are using that space, I mean, you've got a lot of activity around there, you've got lights, you've got
The
everything
middle
going
school
on.
might be an option.
middle school would be a great
And
complex
that's
to
close
turf.
by, and
Yeah.
you've got,
And light if we could.
Potentially, I don't know.
But turf without lights is good for the schools, but it's not gonna help the youth sports groups, because by the time, this is a problem in the fall too. Right now, it's a big problem, but in the fall, at the end of the fall seasons, it's even more extreme. There's no daylight left,
Right.
once the schools get off of the fields.
I think
So
for youth sports,
there's
the
nothing
lighting-
left.
Right. No, I
So,
agree with you, I think.
That's why when I talk about soccer, when I'm advocating for soccer, getting more turf space, it's not actually about the turf, it's about the lights.
Right.
So,
Is the land next to the Baptist church land at the town park? You know, which,
There's a lot of abutters.
there's an angry about it.
There's a very angry.
yeah,
Yeah,
but the town owns the land.
We're also
That's how I
getting,
feel
we're also
about it.
getting
Yeah.
to the choice to be made here is, because at one time this was happening where the town was looking for more fields, and they wanted to take open space that we had, wooded areas, clear it out and make fields. That didn't happen. Instead, we went with the artificial turf, and we took the fields we had and made them more useful. That same question is here, so I think we need to point in one direction or the other, because we'll sort of have, otherwise we'll have the open space competing with the recreation. If we're saying, let's eliminate some open space to put in more recreation. This plan says, let's take the fields we have and make them artificial and light them, so we can get better use out of them
More use
without
time.
taking any land away from the open
I
space
don't
we
think
also
that,
want.
I don't think that problem's really there, because, I mean, I know I'm a soccer guy, but I know about what soccer needs, I know what lacrosse needs, I know what baseball needs. The town really just needs one more nice big field right now that's similar to the multi-purpose, and that's it. And I don't think that there's any need to clear out any of the open space, you know, the natural areas, which, you know, I cherish as well. It's really just, it's not about a ton of new fields or a major outdoor complex for sports. We've got tremendous fields now. We're just short of them by maybe one big field. I think baseball is something that the high school has mentioned, but there's a lot of baseball fields.
So what would that field be? Do we have a
Soccer.
definite, no, I mean the
Soccer
location?
lacrosse,
What
multi-purpose,
was the
not a big-
location?
That location,
Yeah.
In the middle school.
the parcel
With
of
lights,
land
though.
that they just purchased, that's between the First Baptist Church and the high school, would be a prime location for that.
That would be, yeah.
Because the thing, when we were talking about a rec center before, especially at the visioning session, people really, there were a lot of people, maybe it was just towards the group of people that were there, but a lot of people want a rec center that's not a part of the school complex, that's not centered only towards school-age kids. So,
Well, you could do programming during the day at the rec center for elderly people if it wasn't part of the school.
yeah.
You know, you could have, but I think to your point about the fields, if we lost the lodge fields, then we probably would need another one.
we'd be in
We
trouble
need
with
that
the fall.
field,
not
and so
just
we
the
don't know what's
spring.
gonna happen with that, and that might be a property we really should look at.
So I think with respect to goal 7 though, rather than improve maintenance, we probably want to say expand opportunities for extended use of fields.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know, there's a lot of times that I'm always up at the high school. And there are a lot of times I'll drive by to that back field and the lights are on and there's nobody there. I can't tell you how many times that teams are scheduled and they don't show up for practices.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a big problem, and I know what the youth groups pay for light usage, but there's nobody on the
And
field.
when you send me the bills, you see all the ones where I turn them off early, because I'm on people. I keep on them.
But
You know, they have to let me know if they're not going to be there, because I get other people out there.
yeah, but there's a lot of times where that field is empty.
I
They
program
operated
for
those
soccer.
lights
I program
programs?
the lights by the day.
Right.
Every week, every Monday, that's what I do. Some of the other groups, they program
That's
a
amazing.
block for the whole, I have 58 teams right now. They program a block for the whole season,
Yeah.
and then they go in and edit it later on, so.
But if we had a new field with new lights, could they work differently so you turn them on when you're there? And they stay on for an hour and then you
Well,
have to,
you-
or maybe it's not an hour, something
You
that's
would
safe.
still want it to be
Yeah.
protected, you know, by codes and stuff. I turn it off and on with my phone. So if someone calls me, and I'm at the grocery store and they say, hey, it's raining, we're not gonna practice
There's your
after all.
answer. Pretty easy.
Yeah.
You just give everybody Chuck's
But
cell
you can
phone.
do it from anywhere.
Yeah.
That's what pretty
No,
much
I do it on
happens.
my phone, it takes 2 seconds.
That
You
is
can call
awesome.
them
Yeah.
and-
You can call them and they'll do it.
Is that Nest for town?
Huh?
But
So
maybe they
this-
have to turn them on with their phone too when they are using it.
Well, there's only a few people that
You know,
have
so they're not
access to it at all.
They can't program big blocks or something.
Just think of
Yeah.
the havoc we could raise if we all had that app there.
Oh my God.
The lights are out.
So 2 areas that have been
People in Manhattan
looked
want
at,
to go to bed,
that
they
might
turn all
be
the lights
lost,
out.
would be the Lodge Field is one,
Turned them off
that's
for
a really
last year
large
several
multi-purpose
times.
field, grass field.
rain.
If that was
I
lost,
drove
and the
by
other
it.
area that
That's
we've
what
been
happened.
looking at is the
It was raining,
ICC,
nobody was
the
there.
Islington
Just
Community
drove by.
Center. And I think that falls into the community center goal formation, because right now that's the only indoor recreation programming space that we have that's not shared school space.
You were talking about the community center in Islington? And did you mention how we're supposed to get the same number of square footage, but it looks like that's not happening now in the development of the Islington?
The discussion was always that we would replace the community uses that are there now. And we had a discussion at Islington Center Task Force meeting where the Recreation Department, the Youth and Family Services, and MMO all double counted. They all counted the sanctuary and the hall as part of their space. We're not replacing them 6 times. We are putting 1 hall into the new plan.
Is it
We
the
have
same
1 hall.
size?
It's
Is it the same?
significantly
It's
less.
actually, it's larger than the halls that are there now, the way it's designed right now, but it's 1, not 2. And the idea is that it would be available to be used for the same uses that are there now. Not for expanded uses, for the same uses.
But you won't have the MMO I've heard that MMO is.
No,
used
MMO will
for-
be using its own facility, so they'll be actually,
No, I mean recreation sometimes uses the MMO space.
yes.
No, it doesn't.
Recreation
That's what
uses
I
its
heard.
own space. It doesn't use the MMO space. There
That's not
there
what I
are
heard.
rooms on the hallway
Yeah.
that has MMU, but it's not the MMO
Yeah.
rooms. Those are restricted and locked.
They would use a hall, like during the day when MMO was there, they might use a hall on a rainy day. When they leave at 3 o'clock, you might have a program. So that space.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a big space.
And
Yeah.
classrooms that are in there as well.
And then you're also going to lose parking spaces for the ball field. There's about 30 spaces that will be gone.
There's actually more parking that will be added. There won't be a loss of parking spaces.
But there's a bigger need for the use because there's 18 two-bedroom condos, and then you have all the
The
businesses. so
condos
there's-
have their own
space.
parking that are restricted that are underneath. So it's the commercial parking spaces that'll be there now. There'll be more commercial parking spaces than are there currently.
No, I know, I keep
Used in a
hearing
similar
that
manner.
there's more parking, but there's also a larger square footage of businesses and residences. So it's not like they're getting more parking spaces. That ball field parking, the 30 spaces from the town will be gone.
Well, the 30 spaces that are behind the library now, they're used by the library and by the ICC,
Right.
will be replaced with commercial spaces, not with public spaces, but they will be used in the same manner. Just as people now park at the CBS spaces, they would be able to park in those spaces. They will not be restricted spaces. They will be open for people to park for
Okay.
whatever need they
I
have.
hope it says that.
So my only point with the goal is just that this is potentially space that would be changing. We don't know what's happening with the lodge, we don't know what's happening with the ICC yet, but, you know, to tie into the goal being for development, you know,
For
look at what's
community
adequate
programming.
space and how to meet that need.
Okay.
Well, that question should be hopefully resolved before we have this plan finished, right?
I would expect it to be. This plan, we're hoping to take to fall town meeting.
We just bounced around from a lot of things. Like, I-
You were taking
Like
notes?
the very basic,
They've been
even
taking
what
notes.
Charlie was discussing, which was very intriguing. We're like I feel like we're all over the place right now a little bit. So is like, could goal number one then be, like clearly, I tend to think like fields, like, is that,
It's kind of the
would
low
that
hanging
be
fruit of
goal
everything
one?
too, you
Well,
know?
that's
That we
what's
need
gonna
more
happen
fields, and we
eventually,
have to
if
try
it's
to,
not, so there's no
I'm just
goal.
kinda lost.
Yeah, we have a list of
Expand the
goals.
usage
We're
for
getting
the
a list of
fields.
goals. I don't know if we need to prioritize them and put them in order right now until we see them in
Okay.
front of us, but, you know, they're listening and, yeah, that's,
So what'll
we still have a
what'll
number of
happen now
priorities.
is Gina will revise the list of goals and objectives that you have now. We will send that around to everyone, and if you could send back comments on that, just to staff, not to everyone, so that we don't violate open meetings law, but send it back to me, Abby, Nicole, and Karen. We'll review it, and we'll review it with Gino and Jennifer, and we will come back with a further revised document for your next meeting that includes any goal, any objective that any one member has suggested, and then we can actually prioritize them and vote on them. We'll go through it individually and speak through each goal and objective.
I feel like looking at the fields, assessing what we would need for fields and where we would go from a budgetary standpoint, and then goal number two would be the act, because that almost would be the funding mechanism behind design, say, for each of the, or what you can achieve, I guess, and then your justification for the act at a town meeting would be your first goal of the overall cost of what you're looking at.
I don't think we're quite ready to order them, though.
No,
I
no,
think we
no,
need to
no, I
make sure
know.
that
I'm
we
just
have-
trying to make sense of this in my head, and correct me if I'm wrong, if this is like, if I'm off. I don't know.
One thing needs to be decided is if, to go before the town meeting in the fall, one needs to begin to think through, you know, how do we define the elderly or the low income and the exemptions, all the little details of how it would work, how a committee gets, all that kind of, people ask a question. And it would be very powerful at that time to say, here are some of the high priority things we would like to look at right away. So you're not just out there asking for money for nothing. And then finally, the strategy of how do you get it through the town meeting, which is, you know, you gotta do some work. And a part of that would be to reach out to the constituencies that each of you represents, to get them are they gonna show up, are they get their people, to show, they understand it, because I think we could explain to a lot of people how to explain it to somebody else, but I think, and that's even if you wanna do it, and you guys know better, is it too soon to do it, but we've been waiting for 18 years, so, you know, as far as I'm concerned, I think it can be explained, you know, to reasonable people, and to get off our butts and do something, because I don't care how much planning you do, if you don't have the money to get started, and it's only gonna come out of this resource at the moment.
But that's not gonna address some of the indoor stuff, we need another source of funding for indoor.
Yeah, and sometimes this money is spent to plan for the, you know, you can plan for, where do we get that big one? And the YMCA, I still throw out there, is something worth following up on, because they did want to put in a large building on the Westwood line that was swimming, indoor basketball, and hockey. And that was only 5 years ago.
That's a
Do
great
we
idea.
have somebody from the Y here?
Hi, I'm Paula Jacobson. I live at 66 Fairview Street in Westwood. I run the Needham YMCA.
Okay.
So I've been with the Y for 22 years, and I've always wanted a Y in this community. I think we went for Norwood a long time ago. I might recommend an RFP that you put out there that includes some of the things that you just mentioned, a lighted field, and that's what we do, basketball courts, a swimming pool. I noticed that it looked like you wanted, a lot of the residents wanted another indoor, some wanted an outdoor, and then it was questionable whether or not. You know, splash pads are great alternatives to outdoor pools. But an RFP out there, not just for the Y, but any other private-public partnership, to say, okay, this is what everybody wants, what could you propose that we do? The Y is a great resource because it's a non-for-profit. Everybody's welcome, all the rates are done by your income, so if no one's excluded, everybody can come. It just, you know, and we raise money to do that.
The
So
other
when
thing
there's a
about the
public-private
Y,
partnership and there's land available,
the Norwood people was, the Y was gonna get the money. I mean,
yeah, I think that fell through with Bach. if
well,
I
it
recall.
fell through of the local money, but the big money was coming from, you know, it was, you know, the Y's reputation, and so the big part of the funding was, but the car dealerships, but, you know, we get Westwood State, there's a lot of possible
Yeah.
sources of money.
Yeah, with the
Right.
university, yeah, still has
Right.
the baseball.
If you have those lead gifts, then it's pretty easy to get a community campaign going if it's what everybody wants, if everybody's, you know, in for it. The hockey rink is different, we don't typically do hockey rinks, but,
That was a part of the Norwood.
you know, they were considering it.
Yeah.
And I didn't catch your name.
Paula Jacobson.
Okay, nice to meet you.
All right, so, any other comments or suggestions on the goals and objectives? I think they're gonna look quite a bit different next time.
Will we get a few days to review them? I've been trying to read them on my phone on the train. I'm having home from work today.
So the revised ones, yes, so you'll
Okay.
get a chance to get the revised goals, and then you'll have to send them back with your comments, and
Yeah.
I will ask you to prioritize them as well. And then when we come back to our next meeting, we'll start from the point of 8 people prioritize this as number 1,
Oh,
and
good.
10 people prioritize this. So we'll have
Yeah, that would be
a
good.
easier way to discuss it. Do you want to see if there are any other further comments from members of the public?
What time did you want the meeting to go to?
We can
Tip off.
end any
Tip off.
time, no later than 9.
Some people, I see
so-
people
It's a
getting
game tonight.
I'm recommending we just take some further public comment and then adjourn.
All right, so we've really covered everything that's on the agenda. Anyone else have anything they want to say, or does anyone from the public want to say anything?
I'm speechless.
All right, so next meeting, and,
Yes, so we can set a date for our next meeting.
Kristen, did I meet you before?
The
I don't know.
first
That's
week
nice to meet
in,
you. Yeah, I
well,
can't
it's
remember
probably the
if you're on
second
my
week in
table.
May. May 8th or 9th, I know Mondays, 2 members told me they were not available on Mondays, so if we could meet on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, those seem to be the better days. I know the planning board often meets on Tuesdays, but I don't think you have a meeting that.
the date, we were originally going to have town meeting it's obviously available.
Town meeting is May 30th now. It had been May 7th. It's been changed to May 30th.
Right, so May 7th is available.
May 7th is available, but that's a Monday, and I've had 2 members who weren't able to make it because it's on a Monday. So the request is for Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. So Tuesday the 8th, Wednesday the 9th, or Thursday the 10th. Does anyone have a preference, or any of those dates that people here cannot make? We'll steer away
The
from
8th is not good for me, but the 9th or 10th.
9th or 10th.
The 9th is okay for me.
Is there anyone who can't make a
The
meeting on
10th is
that?
not great for me, but I can work around it if I have to.
Okay.
I'm just looking
The
at
9th is fine.
recital dates and stuff.
May 10th is
I'm
bad
fine
for
for all
me.
of it.
Okay, so it looks like May 9th?
May 9th is conservation.
What did I do?
What day
May
is
9th is conservation?
Chuck, I haven't been, yeah. That's what, yeah. Wait, was there an email on your text? No.
So what do you, so May, I think 8th, 9th,
So
and
May
10th
10th
work
is the
for me.
preferred date?
I can't do the 10th.
You can't do the 10th or the 9th then?
No.
Okay.
The 9th, I'm in the conservation.
Do you want to look at the week after that? Do you have a planning board meeting the week after?
No.
We have the 15th.
Okay, what about the 6th, Wednesday the 16th?
Wednesday the 16th? Is everyone good with Wednesday the 16th?
That looks good.
Looks good.
I think I can do Wednesday the 16th.
All right, I probably can't do that because I'm covering for the zoning board, but if everyone else can make it, that's fine.
I can't, but it seems like that's the majority, so go. I have another board meeting that
May
night.
16th?
So the 15th was not good?
The 15th is a planning board meeting.
Oh, okay.
I know I can't do the 17th, but I think I can do the 16th.
Can't make it.
Well, which is better, the 16th or the 17th?
16th for me.
16th.
16.
Okay, we'll go with the 16th.
Either is fine.
Dead here.
I think it will be here. If I can find a larger venue, I will. I'll let everyone know the location.
Okay, we're all set?
All right,
All right.
thank you very much.
That's not a problem, they don't have any choice.